We've seen the photos along with the infamous Zapruder film, Jackie shocked and horrified in her pink Chanel suit splattered with blood. And in the front seat, Texas Governor John Connally, who was also seriously injured that day. Our next guest has talked with Governor Connally a year before he died, and he has details you probably never heard before. One of our favorite guests, publisher of the TrendsJournal, Gerald Celente, joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning, Tommy.
Gerald, the late Governor Connally called and asked you to meet him for lunch about 20 years ago in 1992, ahead of the presidential election. What was the purpose of the meeting?
Well, what happened, Tommy, is I had written the book Trend Tracking back in 1989. And in that book, I had forecast there would be a new third party. And for some reason, I mentioned Ross Perot as the type of political maverick. And, writing that back long before it happened, it was something that Connally wanted to know, what made me come up with that and what I saw happening. So he invited me to lunch, and along with me, there were three other people, actually. And there was a fellow by the name of John J. Hooker, and he was from Tennessee. And he had just run for governor and lost, but he was against all of his campaign financing. But he was the guy that put Ross Perot in touch with Larry King. And Ross Perot had announced his candidacy on Larry King. And the other guy that was there was Pat Cadell, who was a pollster famous for working with Jimmy Carter, and he was doing Perot's polling as well. And Larry King's girlfriend at the time, Rama Fox. So we're having lunch at the Anatole Hotel in Dallas. And I have to tell you, my first, listening to Connally speaking, my first emotion that came over me was embarrassment. I was embarrassed with myself for having prejudged someone that I didn't know, that I only knew through the media. Because as he's talking, I end up cutting off everybody else because I want to hear what he's saying. It was like every word was a sentence and every sentence a paragraph. He was speaking in language and a clarity that was reaffirming much of what I knew but telling me a lot of what I didn't know. And so after we finished lunch, John J. Hooker booms out, "Well, John," speaking to Connally, "go get Nellie, the limousine's waiting outside." So all of us pile into the limousine, and we go to the book depository. Now remember, this is their first time back since the assassination. And you see the photo of me, him, and his wife with the book depository over my shoulder, where the window is the famous window. That's the side of the book depository. We were parked out in front. And I'm sitting across from Connally, and there's Hooker and Cadell to my left and right, and Connally in the middle with Rama Fox and his wife Nellie flanking him. And he starts telling the story what happened that day. And he said, "I heard a gunshot." And I looked to my right. He said, "I know it was a gunshot because I've been hunting since I'm a little boy." And he said, then I was wearing a dark blue suit that day. I was scrunched up in the jump seat and had my Stetson hat on my knee. And I looked over to my left, and there were brains on my shoulder. He said, "I know there were brains because my daddy was a butcher." And then he went on to say how he felt a pounding on his back, and he made two clenched fists, and his face contorted. And he went on to say how, Nellie, he went flying forward. The bullet went through his back, through his hand, through his leg, and out, and how Nellie threw herself on top of him. And they went to Parkland. He said we got there in about 10 minutes, usually a 15-minute, 20-minute drive. But anyway, it was interesting, too. By Nellie throwing herself on top of him, and again, this is coming from Connally, he said that he compressed the wound because, remember, his hands hold on his knee. He goes flying forward. The bullet rips through his lungs. When the motorcade comes screaming into Parkland, there's a doctor on break and sees it. And he goes running down to the emergency room, and this is the doctor that ends up working on Connally, who just happened to be a thoracic surgeon. And what kept him alive was that the air, if he wasn't compressing the wound, he would have suffocated. So we go outside, we take a couple of pictures, there was a Polaroid camera that Rama had. And we get back in the car, we're driving back to the Anatole, and I'm looking at him, and I said to myself, I get it. Now I know why he's saying what he's saying, the way he's saying things at lunch and on and on. This guy's a dying man. My father, may his soul rest in peace, died of asbestos poisoning from working in the shipyards. And before he died, they had him on heavy doses of prednisone. Connally's lungs they were giving him a lot of problems. I think there were adhesions and something else. But anyway, I'm looking at him, and he had all of these big purple splotches on his hands, like my father had before he passed, from the heavy doses of prednisone. And by the way, Connally, this is in October of 1992. Connally passed on in June of 1993. As a matter of fact, I told Hooker later that day, I said, Connally's going to die soon. I said, I've seen this before.
Wait. I want to continue the discussion. Gerald Celente, trends analyst, publisher of the TrendsJournal, talking to us about his meeting with Texas Governor John Connally, who was in the same car as John F. Kennedy. If you have any questions or comments, you can join the discussion. Send your question to 514-800. Our conversation about JFK, that tragic day, and about Texas Governor Connally. And we're speaking with Gerald Celente, trends analyst, publisher of the TrendsJournal. Gerald, what was Governor Connally's theory about who killed the president?
Well, he didn't speak much of that. But as we're going back into the Anatole Hotel, he stops me and he said, I read your book, Trend Tracking. He says, a fine piece of work. And I know your heart's in the right place, but you don't have a clue what's going on in government. And neither do the American people. Because if they did, there'd be a revolution in this country. And that's what really hit me. Because you have to remember, Tommy, this is 92. It wasn't the America of today. There was optimism. Baby boomers were going to be elected into office, and the Cold War was over. We're on the beginning of the digital revolution. And here's a guy that was not only the Democratic governor of Texas, but he was also the Treasury Secretary under Nixon. He's the guy that told Nixon to pack up his bags. The game was over. This is the guy when the United States came off the gold standard. It was under him. So he's telling me how corrupt the government is, and if the people knew what was going on, this country would be in revolution. And coming from a guy that's at the top, that's what really, would knock me over. As far as, who did what, all he and Nellie kept saying over and over again, there were three shots. He didn't speculate on, what else, who might have done what.
What about you? What do you think, Gerald?
Here's what I think. Read my lips, no new taxes. I didn't have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. I smoked, but I didn't inhale. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. In 2011, Obama said we'd be out of Afghanistan by 2014, and now the New Dealers are going to be there till 2024. Why would I believe one thing that they tell me about anything? So, of course, I don't believe a word of what goes on. And I don't know the whys or the why nots behind it. But I do know what Connally said and how heartbroken he truly was in speaking with him face to face and man to man.
A couple of questions coming in for you. One texter wants to know if you ever recouped the money that Governor Corzine's company lost from your account.
Yeah, I got about 96% of it back.
Okay. Another texter says a Russian official has tabled legislation banning the U.S. currency in their country within a year. They predict the dollar system collapsing by 2017. Any thoughts about that? Any truth to that?
Well, I don't. It's hard to say, but now they're talking. China is saying they have enough U.S. reserve currencies they don't want to buy anymore, but they just bought some more bonds. And as bad as the dollar is and the problems that we have, I mean, what's going on in Russia? They're going back into a recession over there. So the reserve currency is going to be around for a bit longer. When it ends, I don't know.
Some people have some questions for you about the tapering. Are we going to see tapering, and when are we going to see it? We'll continue with our discussion. Your questions, your comments for Gerald Celente, trends analyst, publisher of the TrendsJournal. You're listening to the Tommy Schnurmacher Show on CJAD. Stay with us. Our conversation with trends analyst, publisher of the TrendsJournal, Gerald Celente. This texter saying the following: JFK wanted to abolish the Federal Reserve, abolish the CIA, and introduce the silver dollar. Do you think they had anything to do with killing him?
Well, there's speculation on that, as is there speculation on whether or not to go into Vietnam. And people forget that the United States had not been to war since Eisenhower got elected in '52. It was the only time. This is a guy that was, he knew how ugly war was, as being the supreme commander of the Allied forces and a five-star general. So Kennedy, the talk was that he didn't want to go into Vietnam, and of course, he was also, he pulled the plug on pushing forward with the Bay of Pigs, beyond that. So there's also speculation that the military and the CIA were against him. So I don't know. It's only speculation. But as I see the militarization of the United States, it's apparent where the country's heading. Oh, there was a report out just last week. It barely made the news in the States. It made none of the broadcast media on the networks. And that is, they cannot find $8.5 trillion in defense spending since 1996. This is from Reuters. This isn't like a left-wing,
Right.
So it's a takeover, and this is what Connally was talking about. It's a banking and military takeover. It's in front of everybody's eyes.
Now, it was way back when, in Eisenhower's time, he's the one who warned about the military-industrial complex.
Precisely.
Now, what do you mean this $8.5 trillion is missing? What do they mean by the word missing?
They can't account for this expenditures. This is a Reuters story that came out early this week. They cannot find $8.5 trillion. They don't know where they spent it.
And how come this doesn't make headlines in
And this is what I'm trying to say. It's a complete the media. That's why I call them the prostitutes. Look what's going on. You hear the reports coming out, how there's just a report that just came out from a New York Times photographer, how this is, this reminds them of being in Russia with TASS, news agency, with the Obama administration, how they're holding back information. And they don't even let people take photographs of him, and they only give him official photographs from the White House. So that's what's going on over here. Look what the cops are doing every day. You see it. Did you see the latest one that was go all over the internet yesterday about the cops shooting at a van filled with 5 kids and a woman driving away? And this never happened before in this country.
So why is it happening now? What's changed?
It's called the merger of state and corporate powers. 4 words killed capitalism. Too big to fail. In capitalism, there's no such thing. The merger of state and corporate powers is called fascism, and fascism has come to America. Look what happened with the Boston bombing thing. About 100 square miles of Boston. They stopped the trains and what did they do? They went house to house, warrantless searches throughout people's houses with all of these goons and all of this military gear busting into people's homes. How much more proof do people need to see what's going on? And you know the story about why I bought these historic buildings in colonial Kingston. When I came back from Berlin in April of 2012, I said, how could the Germans, of all people, at the height of civilization in the 1930s, culturally, philosophically, scientifically, let a 2-bit freak destroy their country? Because when you go to Berlin, you see an old building, all new construction, an old building, all new construction. Same in Frankfurt, all over. And it took thousands of years to build. And then I came back here, and I said, there are 2-bit freaks everywhere. You can't run away. And that's why I bought these Revolutionary War buildings, because this is my country, and it breaks my heart to see what's going on. And if it happened to the Germans, it happened to the Italians. It's happening everywhere. The people just watch, they applaud, they wave the flags, and that's, by the way, that's what I see happening next. Watch for another false flag or real terrorist strike. All of a sudden, you'll see the yellow ribbons come out and all those made-in-China American flags waving.
All right, we'll have you back again. Thank you so much.
Listen to the Tommy Schnurmacher Show live weekdays 9 to noon on CJAD 800 and CJAD.com.